Hi everybody, welcome to the fourth video of the 5-part series on mastering communication and building relationships. For those who just might be tuning in, the book I'm reviewing throughout the series is Surrounded by Idiots, written by Swedish behavioral expert Thomas Erikson. And the essence of the book is that it equips you with a toolkit that helps you identify the 4 different personality types, which means that you can identify a personality type and therefore tailor your approach, which in turn makes you a much more convincing and appealing individual. The book therefore offers the opportunity for you to work on your communication skills, your interpersonal skills, your managerial skills, and also lets you build and navigate around relationships effortlessly. Also, for those who might be interested, I've created a questionnaire that you can access in the description of this video below, which will show you the breakdown of your personality profile. So if this is something that appeals to you, then let's dive into the video itself and let's get into the blues. So the blues, or as I like to call them the analysts, are the typical high school nerds. Not that that's a bad thing, not at all. I mean, even as Bill Gates said, be nice to nerds because the chances are you might end up working for one. Now the blues tend to be the academics, the perfectionists, the low-key geniuses, and those who are quite reserved but meticulously follows the rules. But the question therefore emerges, how can you identify a blue? So blues are actually quite easy to identify in a room if you know what you're looking for. Now blues don't speak very much and they tend to have a very low profile and can fly under the radar, but there are some telltale signs that you're dealing with a blue. First of all, if they prefer to keep some distance and they might appear a bit cold or detached or very much reserved, chances are that person is a blue. And when they come to speaking and communicating, if they're very neutral and they don't gesticulate at all and rather just stand still, like, for example, Angela Merkel is a perfect example of a blue. When it comes to communication, she doesn't use any fancy gestures like Donald Trump, for example. Instead, she just stands there, delivers a message, and when you listen in, it glimmers with detail. So that's one telltale sign you're dealing with a blue. But blues tend to be very modest about their knowledge, and they may not toot their own horn, but if a blue says a statement, you can usually bank on them being correct. Reds and blues share a number of characteristics. They both prefer logic to emotions, they would both like to cut the small talk and jump straight into business, but there's a key diverging point between a red and a blue, and that's the fact that blues would rather take their time, and the results speak for themselves. The reason why blues results often speak for themselves is just down to the strengths of the blues. Blues typically have an extremely analytical approach of things, tend to have a meticulous attention to detail, are extremely quality conscious, and also have a high level of risk awareness. So this means that the output that a blue can give tends to always be of rather high quality and is generally always correct and will always follow the rules. So for example, this might be through university essays and so forth, coursework, and that blue individual will always adhere to the guidance that the university establishes when it comes to referencing. So you can count on a blue to always reference in the correct format. And within accounting and handling of accounts, this could be done by making sure that the account naming process follows the guidelines that was established by the firm itself. Now blues also have a really uncanny level of focus, and what I mean by this is that they can seem to zone into their work or their analysis for hours and barely move a muscle during the entire process, and that's quite scary. So whenever I was at university and I studied with my friend who also has a blue personality profile, whilst I made to go out to stretch my legs, get some fresh air or have a coffee, my friend would stay and focus on her work, and when I came back it's as if she didn't move a muscle the entire time. And that was quite scary to me, but it might explain why the blues output tends to be of such high quality. It's just because they're capable of zoning into their work for what might seem like hours on end. However, blues aren't superhuman and have weaknesses just like the rest of us. So for example, blues can be seen as even more critical than reds, and this is because of their meticulous attention to detail. They could spot errors, inconsistencies, or mistakes that you might not have even thought of when you actually handed your work over to be reviewed by a blue. Because of this, and their general aloofness and reserved nature, this can make them seem overly cold and detached. Blues are also very much averse to change. The old proverb, if it works, don't fix it, applies particularly to blues. This is because blues require a lot of time to adjust and are generally not very change ready as individuals. The benefits must be very clear to a blue in order for them to start changing their habits. Blues are also very decisive because when it comes to deciding on what course of action to take when it comes to decision making, a blue would want to explore all the facts, all the logic, all the alternatives, and exhaust every last avenue of information before deciding on what is the best course of action to take. So when it comes to short-term decisions, when there's a strict time pressure, blues are not particularly very good at this. So when it comes to adapting to blue behavior, there are always some key principles you should know. So first of all, always be prepared to give further information on how you came to your overall conclusion. So when you're giving your input to a blue, give them the key points, but attach all the data and information that you use to come to your overall conclusion. But chances are they will probably ask for it anyway. So generally, blues don't do too well with a constant bombardment of emotions. So try not to be overly enthusiastic, emotional, or hyperactive. So a good example of this is SpongeBob and Squidward. While SpongeBob is pretty much a textbook yellow, being ridiculously positive, enthusiastic, hyperactive, quite emotional, and has an absolute lack of understanding of any such thing as personal boundaries, Squidward, on the other hand, is very much blue, and he just wants to be left in peace and enjoy some me time. But of course this is refused under SpongeBob because he just has constant antics, and Squidward has to constantly get involved, and this means of course he turns into a rather grouchy character. So generally speaking, blues don't do too well with constant chats or the usual antics of a yellow. They would rather just be left alone to focus on their work. And of course, chucking a blue into a room full of yellows could very much be their own personal version of hell. As I've said before, blues tend to be very much quality conscious and also have a meticulous attention to detail. So when you're giving your work to a blue, make sure you've read it again, and you've read it a third time for good measure, just to make sure that you can't spot any obvious mistakes, inconsistencies or errors, because the blue will judge you for the quality you deliver. Now blues are like reds. They're there for the task and not for the people. They're not there to make friends, they're just there to do their work and to do it at a high quality standard. So therefore, skip the small talk. They will appreciate this, and blues tend to be people of few words anyway. When it comes to a blues temperament, their temperament is unique. They have a barrel like a green, but it also comes equipped with a handy little tap. And that might explain why I've never actually seen a blue explode. Whilst I've seen plenty reds explode like a volcano, or a yellow, or even a green, I've never actually seen a blue explode. And that partly is because of their handy little tap. They can just empty their negativity and stress, so they're never actually going to explode. But if you've been working with a blue for a very long time, you can get indications that they're actually quite stressed out. And this is quite interesting because they don't explode in the same way of any other colour. Instead, they just express themselves through little murmurs or mutters of annoyance. So for example, who's moved my pen? Who's in my file? Who's edited my file? So it's actually quite interesting because blues don't express their frustrations in the same way, but they're not immune to stress, and they do have some stress factors. We all have that friend who barely says anything, and then you're out for drinks or you're discussing a subject, be it history, sport, and you say something, and then that friend goes, actually, technically that isn't true. And suddenly they let loose a bombardment of facts, logic, and details, and you're just sitting there just like... And so that's typically what blues prides himself on. And if you turn around and say, mate, you don't know what you're on about, they're going to get stressed out very quickly. Blues have got amazing capacity for information and detail, and they pride themselves on that. So if you tell them they don't know what they're on about, that's going to stress them out really quickly. Another thing is that blues typically require a lot of time before it comes to making a decision. So if you make a spontaneous change, that's going to stress out a blue because everything is pre-organized and pre-planned in their head. So spontaneous change is a massive stress factor for a blue. Another example is that blues don't deal with emotion very well. So if you chuck a blue into a room full of yellows, again, that's going to be their personal version of hell. So a stress factor is lots of emotional bombardment. They just simply don't know how to deal with it. Now when it comes to giving that bad news piece to a blue, there is a need to be cautious. Blues pride themselves on their high levels of accuracy and are always in a constant pursuit of perfection. Blues also have a ridiculous capacity for detail, and if you're not a blue, this may seem quite surreal to you. So when it comes to having that bad news conversation with the blue, you need to be aware that the blue is not impressed by the fact you have a more senior position or a more fancy job title. Instead, they're simply going to focus on the message you give to them. And what this means is that your message has to be well received and it has to be very credible. So there's a few ways that you can make sure this happens. First of all, know your stuff inside and out. Blues are perfectionists and they have a ridiculous capacity for detail. They will need to understand exactly how, why, where, what went wrong, and how could it be done better. Therefore, they will bombard you with questions at the molecular level. Second of all, and this kind of follows from the first point, but it's essentially you go to that meeting armed with an absolute arsenal of different examples, all of which should be very concrete, descriptive, and if it's in writing, that's even better because you can go into a lot of detail, which of course will be very much well received by the blue and therefore will make your message a lot more credible. Finally, try to make sure what you say appeals directly to the blue's state of thinking. Try to link things through, therefore, with logic and not emotion. And also, on that note, it's quite important that you don't act on a personal level, especially if you don't know that blue so well. So whilst it might feel quite natural to, for example, slap the blue on the back at the end of a meeting to indicate friendliness and that you're still friends and it's just business, then this could obviously be taken the wrong way by a blue. And therefore it might reduce the credibility of your message because they might feel that you crossed a personal boundary. Of course, blues take personal space very seriously. So a good way to think about the best way to do things is by thinking things through with a red lens. They would book in a meeting, give them all the information they need, slap them with the extra data or details if they need it, and then leave the meeting in a quick and efficient way. They wouldn't link things through with anything to do with emotions, but instead speak in purely logical and business terms. And this is an ideal way to deal with a blue, because reds and blues also think in a similar fashion. But just make sure you have the detail ready. So just like all the other deep dives I've done into the different personality types, I appreciate this might have been quite the download. So therefore I've created a slide which more or less sums up everything I've discussed throughout the video. So now I'm going to offer you the chance to pause it and have a little read through. So, what do you guys think of the blues? Have you got any funny or interesting stories that includes a blue? Please share this by commenting on the video below. And on that note, please remember to like and subscribe, and please hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. And also always, I'm going to round off the video with a nice little quote, which is, "Thought constitutes the greatness of man. Man is a reed, the feeblest thing in nature, but he is a thinking reed." And that quote comes from Blaise Pascal, who was a 17th century French mathematician, physicist, investor, writer, and a Catholic theologian. And that quote I feel fits in quite nicely with a blue personality profile. So I know that I've done each of the personality deep dives in weekly intervals. Unfortunately, the conclusion of this 5-part series, I can't give a definite date. And that's because I've invested some new equipment, which hopefully is going to solve the audio and the visual problems I've been experiencing throughout the filming process. Of course, there's an issue with it zooming in and zooming out, and also the audio tends to be a little choppy. But again, this equipment should solve those issues. So on that note, please make sure you've hit that notification bell so you don't miss the final video to round this all off. And on that note, as always, thank you so much for watching, guys.